There are a lot of rules to break, apparently. We're back with a smattering of stupendous creatures that really altered the trajectory of terror on the big screen. People are passionate about monsters. This is especially clear to me after reading the comments from the first video. Who knew that picking iconic horror monsters from movies that might not be strict horror could earn me a lifelong ban from all Halloween parties across North America? Occupational hazards, I suppose. I should have known better. Some monsters stick in the collective minds of moviegoers for years to come, and others are emulated over and over in films that follow. So let's get down to business, shall we? Hello horror heads, and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host, Keegan Hughes, and today we're gonna take a look at the top 5 scary monster horror movies that changed all the rules, part 2. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more spicy slaughter. Wicked, let's begin. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Blob.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out, because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater.
Did you know that The Blob was the first 50s monster movie to feature a cheesy tie-in song? Written by Burt Bacharach and Mac David, no less. So, if for no other reason, it did indeed change the marketing rules by adding this weirdly upbeat little ditty. Rocky Horror and Purple People Eater might have made the general public assume that this is more common than it actually was. Okay, now that we've got the trivia out of the way, let's talk about The Blob itself. It creeps and leaps, it glides and slides. In an era full of rubber suits and black and white film stock, The Blob was a formless Technicolor revelation. There was nothing like it at the time, which probably lent to The Blob's lasting appeal. Released as part of a Paramount Pictures double feature, it was marketed as a cheap teen movie. It filled and thrilled all sorts of drive-ins and theaters across the country, launching Steve McQueen's career along the way. In the years that followed, it gained quite the reputation, eventually becoming a cult classic. Hell, The Blob even had a Criterion release. It seems like such a classic, obvious story at this point, but when The Blob was released, it had a lot going for it that other monster movies didn't. It played the story totally seriously with no parody or purposeful goofiness to be found. A meteor touches down in rural Pennsylvania, releasing a ravenous, jelly-like creature. Rebel teen Steve Andrews campaigns desperately for people to believe his Blob sighting, but nobody buys in. Price of being young, I suppose. After eating everything and anything in sight, the good folks in charge realizes that the Blob hates the cold and drops it off in the Arctic. Things will be alright as the Arctic stays cold, right? I guess they didn't have too much foresight back then. How many movies, TV shows, and comic books have referenced the Blob at this point? You think the number's in the hundreds? And that's not even counting the 1988 remake. Coming in at number 4, we've got Mimic.
Friends. Come here. Please.
This is an interesting case study. Mimic changed the rules by following them pretty much to a T. It's a movie that takes very obvious inspiration from previous game changers like Alien and Event Horizon. But even in playing the hits, it manages to elicit a fabulous amount of scares. Guillermo del Toro rarely misses, and Mimic does what it does well. After introducing a special breed of cockroach-termite hybrids into the infested Manhattan sewers, it seems that Dr. Susan Tyler had succeeded in eliminating the roach-borne Strickler's disease. But if that were the case, this movie wouldn't be very interesting, or anywhere near feature length. Nah, the roaches come back, bigger and badder than ever. And thanks to the genius scientific intervention applied by Dr. Tyler, they're able to mimic human beings. Mimic. See what I did there? Mimic doesn't just show us a creepy human-sized cockroach monster though, it sets up a bunch of moving parts and eventually knocks them all down. It's creepy because it employs all sorts of familiar fare and then uses it all in unfamiliar ways. Plus, Del Toro is a genius when it comes to horror, so it really shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that this is excellent. Now, if all of that isn't enough to convince you that these cockroach monsters changed all the rules, I'll end number 4 with this. By managing to enact thousands of generations of evolutionary change over a very short period of time, the Judas breed cockroaches did indeed change all the rules. Wonderful. Coming in at number 3, we've got Tremors. Graboids, baby, ain't nothing like them. After attempting to develop an educational safety video for the US Navy, SS Wilson and Brent Maddox struck gold. Originally conceived as land sharks, these monsters were meant to make people consider what might be able to pin them down at a certain location. Deciding there was probably big money in an idea like this, the duo set off to Hollywood to create a very long-running franchise. What other movie could make a terrifying creature best known as an axe blaster? Somehow the folks behind Tremors managed to make a franchise that stays fresh, keeps the fans happy, and gleefully employs insane subterranean monster after insane subterranean monster. It walks a fine line, bouncing back and forth between comedy and horror. Many movies attempt to do this and fall flat on their faces. What's really interesting is the longevity of this series, even after a pretty mediocre starting performance. Tremors made $16.6 million on their $11 million budget, which doesn't really put too many Hollywood films in the sequel territory. But hey, there's another Tremors coming this October, 2020. Through the magic of clever marketing and home video sales, it is still kicking. The original is by far the most entertaining of them all though. With some quality performances by Kevin Bacon and company, it weaves a tale of a tight-knit small town dealing with an unimaginable threat. Nobody seems to be a lifeless caricature, everyone contributes to the plot. And of course, that's all window dressing compared to the graboids themselves. A truly bankable and cheap to film monster if I've ever seen one. Featuring a creature that spends most of its time underground was a stroke of genius, especially when you can imply its size and never really have to show it. B-movies should look to Tremors as a blueprint of sorts. Coming in at number 2, we've got Alien. Yeah, I know we talk Alien a lot on this channel, but how was I supposed to make 2 scary monster movie horror lists without mentioning the Xenomorph? Or Ripley? Or the insane cultural impact that Alien had? Come on. We all want to revisit this flick anyways, why not just watch it for the 15th time? Alien pretty much spawned an entire subgenre of movies, one that other entries on this list owe their existence to. Horror in space, in dank, dark, close quarters. Combine any 2 of those 3 elements and you likely owe some royalties to Ridley Scott. A penis-shaped alien? Thanks, H.R. Giger. A ship stopping to grab something that they probably shouldn't? Merci, Mr. Scott. Saving the cat, or anything else along those lines? Blessings be upon you, Sigourney Weaver. At this point, I don't know if it's even possible to understate the effect that Alien had on the horror and sci-fi spheres. How many best of all time movie lists does it appear on? How many filmmakers cite it as a major influence? How many sequels, spin-offs, and merchandising opportunities rose up from the fertile soil that is Alien? And I really haven't even touched on the main monster itself yet. The Xenomorph might go down in history as one of the most iconic creatures to ever grace the big screen. The chest-bursting scene burned itself into the nightmares of people everywhere. The horrible little mouth within a mouth it has. The overtly sexual design of it all. The fact that it evolves before our very eyes, or at least beyond our sightline before coming back bigger and badder, is incredible. When you think of a killing machine perfected by evolution, your mind immediately goes to the Xenomorph, right? We could talk about the sequels too, but I only have so much time. Maybe next one. And finally at number 1, we've got Nosferatu. My first encounter with this pointy-toothed, elf-eared, spindly-fingered vampire was through a particularly scary episode of a children's cartoon. Anyone around my age range likely had a similar experience. Nosferatu appeared as a gag in the hash-slinging slasher episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, they should have called him Count Orlok, but hey, 80 years after the initial release of Nosferatu, he is still a horror icon. Imagine having that kind of longevity in any capacity. Sure, it was played as a joke in this cartoon, but the original film, when it was first presented to the public, was taken as anything but. Pulling on German expressionistic filming techniques to instill a sense of pure dread in the audience, it set the stage for pretty much every horror movie that came after it. The darkness, the creeping, looming shadows, the overall sense of impending doom. All pieces to the horror puzzle that would eventually fit in all sorts of movies. This is the vampire tale that everyone knows before everyone knew it. References to Nosferatu are barely references anymore, they're simply part of the pop culture lexicon everyone's familiar with. And that, if nothing else, is a prime example of changing all the rules. Killer, we made it through part 2. Did any of these entries blow your mind? Do they still hold up after taking the world by storm upon release? Or are they better as reference points in our modern world? Is anyone gonna chew me out by posting half a dozen comments down below? Make sure you let me know. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more berserk ones from the top 5 scary horror movies you need to watch this year. T. Chase says, a tomato alpaca farm. I deeply respect your ability to say that with a straight face. It's not too difficult. I think the real challenge comes from the Zucchini Llama Ranch. DC Carter says, the rental was good, Keegan. I'm sure it's not everyone's kind of movie. A little slow at first, but I liked it. It's good to hear. You can never really tell before a flick is released. I still haven't managed to eke out some time to watch it, but hopefully I will soon. Spencer Beard says, rolled the dice on Color Out of Space with a free Redbox rental, and my wife and I were in such gobsmacked awe of what we beheld. Gorgeous cinematography, atmospheric score, and the best cosmic horror to date. It's the best cosmic horror movie, in my opinion, and the best new horror movie I've seen in ages. Just brilliant. That is a wonderfully impassioned review. I'm glad you found something that you resonate so strongly with. Isn't horror just wonderful? Maximine DeMello says, Color Out of Space is not on Netflix. Liar, liar. Well, it sounds like you need to make a quick trip to Canada, or use a VPN. I think one of those is easier than the other. And Jackie Pugh says, if I ever finish this seriously effed up movie, I'll check out a few of these. Pretty crappy when you're the lead person in a movie and don't ever get paid. It just goes on in a continuous loop. By the way, the horror movie I'm talking about is called Life. Been pretty sucky the past few months. Well, it sounds like you're in a bit of a pickle. If I were you, I'd have a very stern chat with the director. Let me know if you get a meeting with him. And that's all the time we have for today. Before I jump through a painting like Mario, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more fleeting fear. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. So if for Rocky Horror and the Purple People Eater might have made the general public Technicolor revelation. Technicolor revelation. Why can't I speak today? Released as part of a Wilson and Brent Maddox. Originally conceived as land sharks, these monsters were meant to I don't know what's going on, man. My mouth just isn't keeping up with my brain today. Nobody seems to be a lifeless caricature like me right now. But then a mouth it has. The overtly sexual. No, that doesn't make any sense. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more